Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Tired F1 Pod, coming to you in the middle of a very quiet summer break. There's literally nothing happening today or yesterday, Shez. How do you feel about how the summer break is going for you thus far?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we've ticked off a lot of boxes. We've done the Checo uh,
We
not
have.
being sacked by Red Bull, which was a weird story. We've done uh, Jonathan Wheatley leaving Red Bull. Yeah, we've done. What else have we done
We've we've
recently?
we've anointed Piastri as the Prost of today. We've done that.
We have done that.
It's no
Yeah.
small feat.
Um, we've talked about George Russell being selfish, perhaps, and or maybe not selfish. Watch that video. That was fun.
That
Um,
was a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah, so we've covered a lot of stuff. So maybe today we just go out on off piste and talk about what we want to talk about. What
Let's
do you want to talk
let's
about?
yeah, let's get into it. I mean, I'm amused by the fact that this all comes by way of Charles Leclerc, right? But he did an interview recently in which he praised Lewis, but also talked about going at it with him, which I would fully expect any Formula One driver to do. None of his comments were either surprising or controversial. I don't expect any Formula One driver to say, yes, there's a seven-time world champion coming in, and so I'm just not even going to try hard to beat him. Like that's not going to happen. And if anything, he should take a cue from George,
Hmm.
which is where I think we need to head to today, right? And kind of see where we're at with this whole George versus Lewis thing, because in the aftermath of the Belgian Grand Prix and the DQ that was for George, I think one of the things that sort of came back was did George run a better race than Lewis, right? Because I mean, at least on track it was, right? And it didn't quite pan out that way. But for his part, you couldn't blame George for any of these things. And then you'd have to wonder if he had actually been able to keep that result. Oh my God, all hell would have broken loose.
Uh, yeah, I mean, I think I've said this on another platform already, but I think that Lewis Hamilton was probably driver of the day on Sunday.
Was he though?
Ooh, we're gonna do this, are we? Okay, yeah,
We're
cool.
gonna do it. I mean, I don't. Yeah, look. I mean, George couldn't keep the result because his car was one and a half
Underweight.
kilos underweight. Okay,
Yeah,
but it's not like he was the one who took the weight off. Like it's not.
but he still benefited from it though.
I understand that, but he didn't go in to go to them and say that. Oh yeah, let's make the car underweight. But and also, look, I mean, I,
What does that have to do with anything?
I don't understand. Why wouldn't he be the driver of the day? I mean, to me, that's like. I mean, we heap praise on Ferrari drivers and Carlos in particular when they call out these strategies from the cockpit, and George did just that. And full disclosure, I'm not like a George Russell kind of fan or anything. I don't even have him in my top five, let alone. But driver of the
I
day,
think,
pretty cool.
look,
Yeah.
I think if you're talking about that kind of level of tire management, right? Charles Leclerc did a really good job of it in Japan, right? But the tires were actually degrading. He ended up losing a position to Carlos because his tires, despite what he had done in that second stint in Japan, he wasn't able to keep a faster car on newer tires behind him. That was just the way it was. Whereas in Spa, actually the although when I watched it, I was very much like, wow, George has outdone him. Like this is a tire whispering masterclass. Actually, when you looked back at that race again and the advantages that he had, the 1.5 kilo weight advantage he had in and of itself is going to bring an advantage
Okay.
to his tire wear.
Fair enough.
Second, the fact that the degradation on that track was much better than everybody expected. Third, the fact that the DRS zone had been shortened. Fourth, the fact that we were in 2024 and cars are not following as well as they were in 2022. All of that meant that he was able to keep his tires alive for longer, and the chargers behind him weren't getting the opportunity to pass him as
Okay.
easily as they would have done in previous seasons. So yes, I think it was a good strategy call, brilliant strategy call, in fact. But I think the actual driving feat
Whoa, 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 whoa.
went to
Okay, okay.
Lewis.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I understand that. But I mean, Lewis started P2, right? I mean, P2? Yeah. Was he P2 or P3? Okay. I mean, look, he was fighting Checo at the beginning. That was the whatever. It's that wasn't much of anything. I didn't say that Lewis didn't deserve the win. We're talking about driver of the day, right? That's what we're talking about. And so for me, George Russell would be driver of the day, even if he came behind Lewis, even if he was second, or even if he was third, because nobody could have seen that coming. Nobody could have seen, and with everything that you've talked about, those things were true for everyone else too. The shortened DRS was true for everyone else. That's probably why Leclerc was able to hold off Verstappen, was able to hold off Lando too, right? And we saw that play out throughout. So, I mean, things like that were equal for everyone. But from where George was, and yes, you can say that, okay, he had nothing to lose because worst case, he would have, even if this had failed and his tires would have gone off, he would have probably ended up where he was to begin with anyway, or
Correct.
wherever he
So
was
George
at.
benefited from a Hail Mary, right? He
Perfect. I
benefited
mean,
from a
like,
I've got nothing
you
to
take the
lose.
shots you take, right? I mean,
Whereas Lewis qualified better than his teammate because he actually took qualifying seriously and then didn't put a
I didn't
foot
say
wrong in the
I didn't take
race.
anything
So
away from Lewis.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just
But if
saying
we're talking
driver of the
about
day.
yeah, but you have to. If you're going to give one driver of the day, that means you're taking away from one driver and giving to another. And I'm
Two
saying
others,
that
by the way, but
in
yes.
terms of the driving talent, the effort and the performance that was required, Lewis put in a better one than George did because George made one snap decision and that made his race. It was actually not as difficult to do what he did than what Lewis did in terms of keeping that Red Bull behind him at the start, passing Charles Leclerc cleanly, keeping the lead, making the right strategy calls that were correct for the race that everyone was running, and then to be outdone by something that I think was out of his control. And I think he accepts that as well. I'm not taking anything away from George in terms of his decision making. It was a great decision to do what he did. And he should have been allowed to fight to keep that position, which is what happened. Absolutely agree with that. And on track, he deservedly came ahead of Lewis. But there were consequences to that, which is a separate issue. But I think in terms of the overall driving performance, the reason that I would give Lewis driver of the day and why when you say I'm not taking anything away from Lewis, well, you are because you're not giving him driver of the day. Um,
No, I'm not
I
saying
give
that.
him driver of the
I
day
mean,
because
most people gave
he
it to him
pulled off.
because it closed like 10 laps early. I mean, it could. I mean, look,
I think he pulled off the more difficult driving feat to do what to get to the position that he did in the car that he did.
okay,
That
you
was
can
my
say
reason.
that, but he was also following what everyone else was doing. It's not like he had to bravely go against other people's strategies to kind of get there, right? And your point is fair. Look, with Max being 10 places behind, right? That there was that, right? Otherwise, we don't know what that looks like. You can't really put Leclerc in the mix on there. Like the Ferrari was nowhere close to being. I mean, it's a miracle that Leclerc inherited that podium or even had P4. And I mean, that's just driving. I think we need to salute Charles for that and not admonish him for all the silly mistakes he makes because that is an
Yeah, sure, but
underperforming
it
car by
wasn't
any
anything.
means.
But he also didn't do anything spectacular, which is
And
why I
also
couldn't give him
check
driver
and
of the day.
fair enough. And also Checo overtaking Checo, it wasn't a big deal. I mean, look where Checo ended up. Like it's crazy. He ended up behind Max, right? That's crazy.
Mate,
Like so that's not.
that was a raging Checo on the start line, and Lewis dealt with him,
I don't
right?
disagree with that, but I just don't think that
So then
those things.
why are we arguing about
But
this?
those things put together aren't as great as where George had to come from. And I love the fact that you have to make these decisions in split seconds. You don't know if it's going to work or not. Yes, the car was underweight, but even with that, there were a lot of things going against him because his tires were
Really?
way too old,
Yeah, but we've
way
just
too
said
old.
that the tire degradation thing wasn't an issue here.
It
He
wasn't an
could have
issue,
done the entire. So yeah,
but
so the tires being old
relative
is a
to Lewis,
non-issue.
his tire. No, no, but I agreed, it wasn't an issue. But Lewis had newer tires. Whatever tiny advantage would there
But
be,
it was
there was
tiny
there.
advantage, yeah.
There was that. Okay,
But
yeah. So
it
yeah,
wasn't enough. Like it wasn't enough in the hands of anybody behind to be able to come through.
yeah.
There had to be a massive speed differential. And yes, I guess if you're going to cost Lewis a maximum score, I'd say he probably could have kept a tighter line into La Source on a couple of occasions. But that was it. That was it. He done all of the hard work and probably should have expected to win that race fairly comfortably, which he did in the end. But the fact that George was in the position that he was in was through a strategy call, not through driving talent. That's why I would
Oh
give
wow,
Lewis driver of the day.
wow. Okay. Well, I mean, look, I'm not a George Russell fan, but you telling me that he has no talent relative to Lewis Hamilton, and that those
Yeah.
are your
Okay,
words, man. Like,
we're
not
gonna have to
driver.
deal with this. We're gonna have to deal with this, right? I never said that George Russell has no talent, but you're quite good at like taking what I'm saying and then going, I
You said that.
no, no, no,
You
no, no,
said
no,
his win was
no, I
not
didn't.
based on talent, but a
Talent, correct.
fluke,
Not
but
saying
a
that
fluky
George
call.
has
Like
no
that's what you're
talent.
saying.
Not saying that George has no talent.
I'm talking
I'm
about
saying
this
that
race, not overall.
yeah, but that's not what you said. You just said
Okay.
Shez just said that
All right.
George has no talent, which
No,
I'm
I agree. I
retaliating
agree.
against. I
I
did
agree.
not say that.
I misspoke. I misspoke. But you saying that George's win is not based on his driving talent and
Correct.
just the fluky call, I think is too much. It's way over the
Why?
line. It's way over
Tell
the
me
line
why.
because
Tell me
you
why
you
then.
you cannot separate the two. How many times have we admonished drivers? I mean, we did that to Lando Norris when in Silverstone, where he never called the team out on their tire choices. So you can't do that. You have to give the driver credit and you have to give the team credit. The only thing in this case is that you have to admonish Mercedes for it because they had more facts in their hand than George did. And the best thing they could have done was to ask George to take it easy so as to not wear out that plank, and that would have been the difference. That's all they really needed to do. It's not the
It wasn't
driver's
just the
fault.
plank. It
Okay,
wasn't just the
maybe
plank. It
whatever
was
it
also the
was.
tires as well.
It
But
was also the tires. I mean, but look, he was trying to aggressively defend, and you can argue that if he wasn't aggressively defending, he would have at least been in P2. And that's been my argument, by the way. I am not saying that Lewis didn't deserve to win. I completely agree with you. Actually, him not winning felt really bad to me because it felt like he did nothing wrong, and I 100% agree with
so,
that.
so actually,
I'm just talking
what you're
about driver of the
saying,
day.
yeah. So actually, what you're saying is that
Look,
George actually killed his tires more defending. So that was a bad driving
but he
decision.
was trying to win. No, no, not at all. Not he
Again,
was. He
that
didn't. He
puts
didn't
it
kill.
back into
No, no,
Lewis's
no, no,
corner.
no, no, no. He didn't know that he was going to have these issues. He didn't. If man, you're telling me that if he knew that his car was going to be underweight, or like if Mercedes had alerted him that look, we might have issues at the end, he would have definitely not fought that hard with Lewis. I think it's
Wouldn't he?
admirable that he fought the way he fought. We love that racing. That is what we enjoyed. I mean, that race
Yeah, but
signified by that
it was
particular
good,
thing. So
and I
so you
think
can't blame the driver for
I
it.
think he drove well in that situation, but he did have
And
significant advantages on his side
Lewis Lewis deserved
of
to
the
win.
equation.
Lewis deserved to win. In the end, he won all 25 points. He deserved to win. I'm not arguing about that. Look, driver of the day is not scientific. It's not. It's more about how you
Yeah,
how you absorb the race and how you feel about it. And you cannot sit up there and say, hey, anyone made a better call than George and trying to make that happen.
sure.
Yes, he had nothing to lose, but so what? I mean, we've seen so many times where the rain come in and everything changes all of a sudden. Nature does stuff too every once in a while, right? There can be a safety car, and Lord knows as a Lewis Hamilton fan, what safety cars are meant for, not just race wins, but for championships. But this was not any happenstance circumstance that was out of anyone's
Sure.
control or act of nature. Like
So,
he made that call actively there.
Sure.
So yeah.
So Amar, basically what we're coming down to on driver of the day for Spa is Amar says that you're driver of the day because you make a good strategy call, and Shez says that
You make a
you're
good
good.
strategy call and
Wait.
you finish the race
No, no,
first.
no, no, no,
He
no, no,
couldn't
no, no,
keep
no, no,
it.
no, 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 no.
What
Look,
do you mean? No, no, no. He finished it first.
he kept that position
Okay, fine.
because he was
Even if
because
he
of all of the
finished
things that I've
second,
just said.
even if he finished second, I maintain it. It's second legal. I'm going to assume that if
Whatever.
he took it
So
easy,
that,
he
but
would
that
have been
was based
second at
off.
least.
That was basically based off one strategy call, right? So it's you get driver of the day because you made a good
Man, how
strategy
odd
call
is it for a car to be
versus
disqualified like that in this day and age?
versus you're driver of the day because you
Yes,
pulled off moves
that is that is.
you
Well,
kept
look,
pace and did the difficult stuff.
yes, he did the difficult stuff at the end too. Now, you cannot argue with me that
Well, we are arguing.
Lewis shouldn't have passed George easily. That could have happened despite everything there.
No, I'm
The
telling you, I can
No, no,
argue with
hang
you
on,
about that
hang
because
on.
nobody behind
I know
could do
you're
that.
arguing. Nobody behind could, but the different circumstances. Look, Max couldn't overtake Charles either, but there was a tire offset there. This was
Oscar
so heavily.
couldn't overtake Lewis.
Oscar couldn't overtake. I mean, that was
Take
towards
Lewis,
the end.
yeah.
It wasn't going to happen. It wasn't. It was too
Why?
late. It was over.
He had 15 laps to do
Yeah,
it.
it was too late. McLaren didn't have it on that day. They didn't have it. We saw Nando
He
struggle
was
throughout.
catching him though, wasn't he? Oscar was
Okay,
catching
we
him.
know that catching is one thing, passing is another one, right?
Exactly, and that's exactly what
Hang
I'm
on,
saying.
hang
That
on,
catching is one
hang
thing, but
on, hang
passing
on.
was not
Yes,
possible.
I agree, but our argument is in the delta, right? At that stage, with what George had, he might as well would have been an Aston Martin at that point. Like, that's my argument to
That's
you.
not true.
That's my
He
argument to you.
wasn't. But yeah, but your
But no,
argument
no, he
is
was.
not correct.
He was.
Am I?
Hang on, hang on. I'm talking about driver of the day again. Look, again, the race points are handed out to the person that wins the race first with a legal car. I do not disagree with that. But I'm just
That's
speaking
not where my
solely as a
argument is coming
driver of the
from.
day.
You
But
are
that's what it's,
saying, you are saying, right, that George Russell was disadvantaged because his tires were older.
it
I
never
am
said.
telling you that
Yeah, no.
he was not. That
I'm
him
also
like
telling you that he was
nursing
not.
some
I was saying
tires.
that Lewis had the advantages to win that race.
7/10. He had a 7/10 advantage per lap.
That's
You needed a
that's
second to a second and a half to overtake. So he did not have the advantage that you think he had.
look, if the second and a half advantage was there, then Lewis probably wouldn't have even won the race, right? We can do that. Like we can't do that stuff. Like ifs and buts are all those things. My point is that's how George pulled off the race win. And even if he hadn't
By
pulled off
making a
the
good
race win,
strategy call. Correct. Yes.
and that's why he's my driver of the day. Even if he was second, Chaz, or even if he was third, he would still be on the podium for me because I and most others, I looked at the odds for that race, right? Post qualifying before race win, George Russell had the longest odds of anyone to win that race. And yes, it was illegal at the end of the day. But you couldn't have said watching that race that George Russell was going to be on the podium. You could have named five. Heck, you would have said Max will be on the podium before that too. But you couldn't have said that George would be on the podium.
Okay, so
And
so
for me,
driver
that's
of
good
the
enough. And
day.
so
So
I
driver of the
rest
day
my
goes
case today.
to. So driver of the day goes if you have a good strategy call and you're an unexpected
No,
winner.
no,
So
no, no, no,
those two
no, no, no,
things
no, no. It can be
are
anything. It can be anything. Driver of the day. How many times have you seen driver of the day not be the race winning driver? That's not what it means. It doesn't mean a driver of the day was someone that you felt as the audience watching deserved to be. Hey, he was my guy today, even though he didn't win,
yeah.
even though he didn't come second, even though he didn't come third, whatever it is. Like, oh, man, how many times have we seen back markers get driver of the day too? Just because it's exciting. It's not
And,
based on
and,
like,
and,
oh, I
and,
have to dominate everything.
sure, that's why for me Lewis was the driver of the day because he
Okay, I
did the more
mean,
difficult thing.
shocking. Yeah, that was the more difficult thing. To just do what everyone else did was the more difficult thing. Fair enough.
But do it better than everybody else did.
Okay, but
Correct.
I mean,
Yes.
but what does that mean? Do it better than everybody else. It doesn't mean you just said there were all these advantages. So it by based on your own argument,
Yeah, George had a whole bunch of
no, no,
advantages.
no.
Yes.
Hang on. Based
Track
on
position
your
was king.
you just said that the track position was king. It was hard to overtake and all of that. So based on that logic, Lewis should have won. It would have been more straightforward.
But he started
Him not
third. He didn't
winning.
start first.
He didn't start third. He didn't start. Okay, he started third, but
He
you
did
know he
start
didn't win.
third. And
He
he had to
effectively
overtake
started
Charles
third. Come
Leclerc.
on, like don't do that. Like we watched
Oh, he
enough
didn't have
Formula One.
to. He didn't have to overtake Charles Leclerc.
It was very easy to overtake Charles Leclerc. Nobody even
Oh, but it's
remembers that.
easy to
You know,
overtake Charles
you
Leclerc.
didn't know that you come on. You didn't think that Lewis was going to overtake Charles Leclerc. Like
I
this
thought
is
Lewis
my
was
point.
going to overtake George, but
This
they're
is
in the
my
same car and he wasn't able to do it. Yes, that
this
was.
yeah. So that is more a reflection on boy. Those two cars are equal, right? So those two cars, it's a different thing.
They were
That's
not
the
equal. One was 1.5
man.
kilos lighter than the
Okay,
other
but
one,
they're two same Mercedes. I mean, look again. You saying that he's starting third with some
and had
disadvantage,
track
like
position and no free
he was
and
starting
free
third
air.
behind two flawed cars, one flawed car in Ferrari and the second flawed car in Checo Perez, who we've already talked about. You saying him starting third is not like him starting behind Lando and Max or Oscar or someone else. It's just not the same thing. Not every third position is the same thing. You starting
Ah,
behind them,
that's what we're doing.
everyone had. You tell me where you had Ferrari at the end of the. I mean, we know that pole by Charles was he pulled out of a blinder. No one in and their grandmother expected that. No one did. So we all knew that Charles Leclerc wasn't going to be, for him to stay on the podium would have been hard enough. We know that. And the fact that he was able to even be P4 is amazing. So I can't. And then Checo Perez, come on. Like really, I mean, we saw he went backward. Everyone overtook him. Max, who started 8, 9 places behind him, overtook him so easily. Like this is not like we can't talk about
And,
Perez
and what
seriously.
what what was George doing up until this point until he made a strategy call that
Well, I
vaulted him
mean,
to the
this is
front?
this is a good one to get into. This is a good segue because you have come on here and said, "Well, has Lewis lost a step because he's not qualifying as great as George?" But there you go. In this race, Lewis out qualified George, but on race day, I mean, even with the brilliant strategy call, look, to make that strategy work is also one thing because George was able
He
to
was the
run
quicker
along for a
race
stint.
driver.
Yes, so he was the quicker racer, and that's it. He was my driver of the day. There you go. Thank you for
No,
saying
no,
that. It
as in
only
no,
took
no.
us
Lewis
30
Lewis
minutes
was
to
the
get
quick
to this.
Lewis was the quicker race driver.
Lewis was the quicker race driver.
Yeah, lap for lap. Yes, he was the
Okay.
quicker race driver.
Okay, fine. I mean, I'm not going to
No,
argue with
no,
you
you
anymore. Yeah,
Because
no,
there's
no,
nothing to argue
it's
about.
fine. It's fine. I mean, there was one guy who was on the podium on the first step. That's all that matters. And all the pictures will show that. They can't really show Charles Leclerc, which is so dumb, by the way. Like, what? So if they're going to disqualify a driver from the podium, I submit that you should go back and do the whole podium thing again. Like, what are those pictures going to look like from the podium from the Belgian Grand Prix? Like, who on earth is going to believe that George Russell didn't win that race? Like, who cares?
I mean, I don't know, but he didn't. And yeah. Anyway,
Oh man,
wow, that's where this one went.
go back and redo the podium, man.
Uh, Interesting. That wasn't quite where I expected that chat to go, Amar, but it was fun.
It was fun indeed. Well, why don't you guys tell us who do you think is more deserving of the driver of the day, George or Lewis? I am sure our viewers will go easy on us, Shez.
I'm sure they won't. I'm sure they won't. If anyone goes, "Oh, Shez is a Lewis fanboy," yes, I
Yeah, totally, yeah. I've exposed him today, guys. This is what we do over summer break.
am.
We've exposed him. Well, on that note, please like, please subscribe. We're reaching that milestone of 1,000 followers, 1,000 viewers, rather, I should say. We're reaching that milestone of 1,000 viewers, a feat we never thought that could happen. Thanks to all of you that watch us. Thanks to all of you that subscribed, that commented. We really, really appreciate this and keep supporting us so we can keep doing more of these debates.